episode 64 of the podcast. This week we're talking about some puppies that I'm training with and the kind of advice I'm giving their owners on how to teach them to be good for handling and carriers. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. This week I want to share a little bit about a puppy training session that I did. So I'm working with two Maltese puppies. I've had a couple of lessons with them already. That they are 11 weeks old now. They came from a breeder who is lovely. They are with a customer of mine that I worked with their last dog for grooming. So they're going to be a grooming customer as well as a training customer. So they're starting off their life in really great circumstances. And sometimes we don't always have that opportunity. But let's talk about what we would do in an ideal world, or what I do if I think it's an ideal world. So I am working with these puppies. We're working on all the normal, house training issues and crate training issues and, helping each dog be their own dog, separating them out. One goes with mom, one goes with dad, introducing them to things. But some of what we've talked about with these owners is that I want them to be thinking that each opportunity for socialization or each opportunity for trying something new should always be something that we leave the puppy feeling like, oh, that was fun, or, oh, I'd like to do that again. Because often what owners are doing, whether we realize it or not, is that they're taking things too far and only backing off if a puppy becomes scared. When instead we want to be thinking, are you having fun? Great, let's stop. Are you having fun? Great, let's back off. Are you having fun? Great, let's back off and see if you want to head back over to that. Or if you want to explore that comb, if you want to look at that brush. Whatever it is that we're trying to expose them to, we want them to feel, oh, that was pretty comfortable. I might want to go back to that. And I find that that's one way that customers get it. Because if we tell them it always has to end on a good experience, then they start pushing too hard and they try to end it on good. So they take them too far, they get them scared, and then they try to calm them down again. If instead we talk to them about, I just want this puppy to think, oh, that was fun. And we're going to take it into very, very small pieces. And like I said, you might be an owner or you might just work with owners. And this is the way that I explain this to my owners. Work in small pieces. Especially if we have the opportunity to build exactly what we want at a nice slow pace, gradually, without ever having them feel uncomfortable. We can set them up for a lifetime of thinking that this is going to be fine. That's really the goal, isn't it? Right now, they're little blank slates. They have no opinions about anything new. They're just who they are. Now, these two particular dogs, one is a little bit more outgoing and a little bit more willing to explore something different than the other one. But he observes, so the female is a little bit more bold. The male observes her reactions to things and then gives it a try too. So we are using that to our advantage. Why not? Right? So we've got these two puppies, different personalities. And it's so important for all of us to remember, our owners don't necessarily know that. But they all have very, very different personalities. And so if they get advice from a book or from TV or from the internet, we need them to know that might not be the best case scenario for your individual dog. What I want you to always be thinking is, if I'm going to introduce something or something new or a new sound or a new tool or something odd or a new person or people with baseball caps or sunglasses, I want them to be set up to enjoy it. Set them up to like it because you have the opportunity to if you're planning it ahead of time. Set them up to like it. Don't push it so far that they don't like it. If they don't want to approach somebody with sunglasses and a baseball cap, that is okay. If they don't want to approach somebody who, is talking loud, that is okay. It'll build. It doesn't all happen at once. It will build. So an example that I give for owners, I want you to imagine learning baseball. All right, I'm not a sport person, but learning baseball. Have you ever seen little kids playing t-ball? It's a very, very basic version of playing baseball, right? Because they have to learn each of the components before they can put it together into a game with any sort of structure. You learn how to throw. You learn how to catch. You learn how to hit a ball on a tee, so a ball that's not moving, before you start learning how to hit a ball that is being thrown, usually by an adult, because none of the kids are able to throw a ball that accurately yet, because then it would look more like, I don't know, golf. Ball gets thrown, rolls to the kid, they hit it with the bat like a golf club. So we think about, we're building all of those little individual skills for a sport, and then they have to learn the rules and the bases and where everyone has to stand, right? We can break it down into its smallest pieces. And we do that when we learn stuff. So even though I'm not a sports person, I get that that's a way to break down all those skills, which also means if a kid is really good at catching, he can work more on throwing, right? We can work more on the thing that needs more work. We can continue to build on all the separate skills without always making it, now we're going to have a baseball game. Another example that I use for customers, learning a musical instrument. I know I went from sports to band camp, but learning a musical instrument, a friend of mine was over and he was interested in my ukulele. Now, in my living room, I have a Celtic harp, 3 guitars, a ukulele, a flute, a piccolo, I think that's, a pocket clarinet. So I've got a variety in my living room at any given time. But he was interested in the ukulele, thinking it would be much, much easier. So I didn't just show him like a tune. I didn't teach him a song. I showed him the easiest chord and a strum pattern, right? Like teach him a little bit about the beat, figure out what he knows already. So those things translate to when we're trying to teach a dog something. Sometimes we go too far. Sometimes we're saying, okay, well, we're going to work on brushing his ears, and that's what we're working on, and we're just going to get these ears brushed. But that's kind of like taking it way too far. If we have the opportunity, if we have our owners working on things, then we don't need to get that done today. So circling back to these 2 puppies, while I was there for this 1-hour lesson, which I do a program, which is a lot of lessons, but this particular 1-hour lesson, I'm at their house, we're sitting on their floor, we talk about how they're doing with the puppy training. When I first come in, they're super excited. That is not the time to start working on something sensitive, like touching around eyes and touching toes, right? That's the time to work on recalls, calling them back and forth to us, blowing off some puppy steam. We worked on tossing toys. As soon as we say their name and they give us eye contact, we're tossing a toy. We're having some fun. We're working on lots of skills all at the same time. And then we'd calm them down a little bit, pick them up in our arms, pet them a little. And this particular time we brought out their carriers, because one of the pups had diarrhea in his carrier on the way to the vet, and we just don't want him to be afraid of it. Kind of worried that he was afraid and that's why he had diarrhea. We're not really sure, but we don't want him to be afraid of it. So we bring the carriers out and we place them into the living room. And one of the puppy who had been sick is sitting there barking at the carriers, and we're putting little bits of treats and toys and stuff, not expecting them to go in, not putting them in the carrier, just letting them see that there's some treats in there. They can explore it, pick it up, put the carriers back. We did a 3-minute repetition of that. 3 minutes, no expectation of getting in the carrier. This is for future crate training. This is for future transport to vet visits. This is for the future. Right. So we start working on other stuff. We're going back to things like, getting their attention, calling them to us, getting them on the pee pad when they start sniffing around, because a puppy that looks like he's thinking about world peace needs to pee, things that owners don't necessarily start to notice until you point it out. Like, yeah, he's looking for a spot to pee. Let's get him onto the right place. So then after we do that, we bring the carriers out a second time. Like, I was only there for an hour. Now we're on our second repetition of carriers. And I just brought the carriers out again, put some treats in them. We're sitting there goofing off. One of the puppies reaches in with her front feet. Great. I call her away and give her a cookie. I'm not even making her go in. I'm actually calling her away from it and giving her a cookie because I want her to think, oh, that was a non-issue. So now the next time she wanders over and her brother follows her. He's thinking, this isn't so bad. Okay, I'll follow you. So now both of them are together in the same carrier, front feet in, kind of sniffing around. All right, so we call them away from it. We put the carriers away again. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes and tell all of your friends. Now we sit down and start talking about touching and the fact that we're not going to start with a brush at the moment. I brushed them a little bit, but I wanted them to get used to, we've talked about it before on the podcast, I'm going to touch you all over with stuff. So we sat down and we took a couple things off of the coffee table. Like, okay, we're going to touch her all over with this tissue box. Because the owners don't have any expectations of how to touch a dog with a tissue box. They're not caring about what's happening with the fur. It's an interaction between the object and the dog. And that's very important at a young age, the object and the dog interacting, instead of worrying about the object getting something done on the dog, right? There's no proper way to handle your dog with a jar candle, but we just pick things up off the coffee table and get moving them around. And the puppy's like, oh, this isn't so bad. So we're rubbing the tissue box all over the puppies. We picked up a remote, rubbed the remote over the puppies, picked up one of their dog toys, right? Because we also want them to know that they don't get to explore these tools with their mouth while we are working on it, even if it's a dog toy. Even if it's something they're able to play with. Like, okay, so we're touching them all over with dog toys. And I am having the owner, put it up next to the corner of their eye, hold up the ear, put it underneath the ear, lift a leg, put it under the armpit, put it under the tail, lower the tail, raise the tail. We're just exploring touching them with objects, touching them all over and making them feel comfortable about it. So even though it's not about brushing today, it was about touching them all over. So we gave them a break. Now we're circling back, put the carriers out again. This time, one of them totally just runs into the carrier. The other one's still a little bit worried. He's watching his sister thinking, I don't know. But do you see how we're slowly progressing and giving tiny, tiny little repetitions and then moving on to something else? So even though you might think that 3 minutes here and there isn't going to do a lot, I had a 1 hour lesson. And I believe we did the carriers 4 times. And the dogs were excited when the carriers came out. The female started running in. The male started going in halfway on his own. So that's in 1 hour session. We did 4 repetitions, right? And made progress because we don't have to do it all at once. We want it to be something they enjoy. So when we think about the kind of things we can send owners home with, we want them to know that getting them used to a carrier or getting them used to having their feet touched or getting them used to, oh, can you work on this near his eyes? We want them to do it in such a way that the puppy is always left thinking, oh, I kind of like that. And no matter how small an approximation, no matter how simple or how basic it may seem, that's okay because we're going to build confidence in that little tiny bit. Just setting the carriers down and build confidence on that, that's good, right? It's T-ball. Like it's learning one note on a ukulele. Just one note, like, hey, look, bong, I played a C. It's the tiny, tiny little thing that can help them start to feel comfortable enough for us to move on. And when you're doing it right, it's about as interesting as watching paint dry. The puppy doesn't become stressed. It's very boring to watch, or sometimes silly. It depends. I'm kind of a silly person. My puppy training tends to be silly, but it's not like, we have a challenge. Like I try to get owners out of the habit of even calling it a challenge because that kind of implies that it's going to be hard. We don't want to make it a challenge. We don't want it to be difficult. We want it to be something they can relax and do and accomplish and feel good about. And we can do really small steps over and over and over again. Why not? It'll be great practice for them to feel comfortable with something tiny. Something tiny. Back to the musical instrument thing. My first instrument was playing flute. Mary Had a Little Lamb is not a particularly interesting song. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, not particularly interesting. But fourth grade kids, when they learn their first song, are psyched, right? Like that's a huge achievement. They're like, I learned a couple of notes and I learned a little bit about beat. And now I can honk out a song because it never sounds good in fourth grade. So now I can honk out a song and I'm doing it and I want to do more, right? I mean, I still play instruments because it sparked that in me. Like I want to do more. So taking those small steps, little tiny things, but having owners touch their dogs all over with stuff. Dogs that are nervous or have had some experiences where they were afraid, right? These puppies are a blank slate. They have no real opinions yet. Everything has been a good experience. All right, I'm making assumptions, but that everyone has tried to make everything a great experience. Certainly having the runs in your carrier wasn't a great experience, but everyone has been trying to make it as good an experience as possible. But even with dogs that are coming with us with some baggage, right, for us to be able to calm them down and just figure out where to meet them. What are they comfortable with? What can we work on that they feel comfortable with? Instead of pushing it to we're working on this because that's what he's uncomfortable with. It's kind of a subtle difference, so I want you to take that in. Are you working on something that he's uncomfortable with by making him uncomfortable? And then trying to rectify it, trying to make it better, because that's kind of going to backfire. Okay? We want to find the point that they are comfortable and build on it. And I will give you another example. Christmas, I was sitting at my cousin's house, and she mentioned that their dog is really kind of nervous about nails. And I'm like, okay, we can work on that. But while I was sitting on the living room floor and people are playing a game and we're goofing off, I was rubbing her and massaging her, and she's a sweet dog and she's leaning up against me. And I took my hand down her leg and I felt her start to stiffen just below the elbow. That would be the point that we work on, near the elbow, not the foot, right? You don't go for the foot, because the foot is the bigger problem. We're going to start at the source, which is, why did you stiffen here? She's a sweetheart. I wasn't worried about her hurting me, and I wasn't there to, work on nails. Certainly that's not something you do at a big Christmas party. If you want a problem, yeah, do it at a Christmas party. But as I was patting her, I realized where her safety net ends, where she's like, oh, I feel great, and you're touching me, and you're touching me. Oh, why would somebody touch a dog's elbow? Right? That's the point that we work on. We want her to get comfortable with us reaching toward her elbow. Don't make it about the feet. We're taking things too fast, and that's really common. It's really, really common for owners to do that too. Like, oh, but we got to work on these feet. So they go for the feet. And that backfires, and then it turns into a dog who might be good despite being afraid. Not the best situation, right? Because that's not going to be a great long-term plan. I'd rather them be comfortable with it. And you can achieve that by gently working at the point that they're comfortable with and making that successful. And it doesn't have to be a whole bunch of treats, and it doesn't have to be a whole bunch of toys. It can just be hanging out on the floor, petting. While I was petting her, I circled back to that elbow a bunch of times while we were playing games. We were not dog games, but we were playing, I think it was a card game at that time. But I just kept circling back, petting her, and she started to become comfortable with my hand on her elbow. Why not? Because I'm not taking her to the point of being totally frightened. So those are just a couple of examples from this week, but I think that it's really important for owners to not think of it as a challenge or working on the challenging area, but to break it down into smaller portions and build successes on the things that their dogs are comfortable with. Because the more comfortable they are with us interacting with them and working on them and touching them with stuff, the more that's going to spread into other areas of their body, other objects, and other people. And that's ultimately what we want, because we want the dogs to be able to handle a new object. So touching all over with stuff, just from your coffee table, pick things up, touch them all over. You start figuring out that if you need to touch a dog all over, you have them stand for it. Might as well stand, because that's going to help me get it underneath you and get over here and turn this around and get under your ear. So that's something that most owners can do. And if they are unwilling to do that, they're not your customer, right? We do not need to get hurt because owners are unwilling to spend a couple minutes a day touching their dog with stuff. No. Now, if they're unable to do that because they're worried about their dog's reaction to them, they need a trainer or a behavior consultant or a vet or a behaviorist interacting with that dog for them. Like, they need somebody who says, okay, we need to take a close look at this. You need some direct help and supervision in how you're going to handle that. But the average Joe can touch their dog, right? The problem is that they go directly for the sore eye. You know, they go directly for the hard boogies next to the eye and try to yank them out with their finger, and they're like, oh, he's still bad for his eyes, but we work on it all the time. But what they're doing is they're making it worse by just going for it and dragging boogies through the corner of the eye every day. We need them to know, take it small. We're going to do the T-ball version. Little teeny tiny steps that build, and they build quite quickly. So this week's action step is to think about a particular dog. Maybe it's your dog. Maybe you have a dog at home and you're like, you know what, let me just see how it goes if I just sit down in front of my coffee table and just start picking up objects. Touching them all over with dog toys, touching them all over with the remote. What happens if I pull out a set of earbuds with the long squiggly line, squiggly wires? And what happens? What happens? Can he handle it? Let's find out. So that's your weekly action step this week. Everybody, have a great week and stay curious. If you'd like more information, you can find me at Chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group, Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast, or the Facebook page, Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.